There was a time when Bruce Willis walked onto any movie set, and the entire atmosphere shifted. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to pose. His presence alone carried the weight of a man who had already lived 1,000 lives on screen and survived every one of them. He was unbreakable, unshakable, a force that felt like it would last forever, but forever doesn't last in real life. At 70, Bruce Willis is standing in a chapter of life that no scriptwriter could soften and no director could rewrite. The world still sees the legend, the hero, the action icon who redefined toughness. But behind the fame, behind the classic one-liners and unforgettable characters, something else has been unfolding. Something personal, something painful, something deeply human. His family knows it, his closest friends felt it. And Bruce, long before the world ever found out, felt it first. Because before anyone understood what was happening to him, Bruce quietly made a decision that stunned the people who love him the most. A decision that left them emotional, speechless, and overwhelmed in a way they never expected. It wasn't about sickness. It wasn't about fear. It was about love. A kind of love so intense that he planned a future he knew he might not fully witness. And within that plan was a fortune, carefully arranged, carefully protected, carefully hidden, designed not to glorify his career, but to shield the people who carried him through it, his daughters, his wife, his blended family that stood by him through every rise, every fall, and every quiet moment in between. This fortune wasn't a boast. It wasn't a reward. It was a message. One final message from a man who built everything through grit, sacrifice, and a lifetime of pushing through pain without ever showing it. And now the question that refuses to stop echoing is this: why did Bruce Willis leave behind a fortune that made his family cry? What did he know, long before the rest of the world, that drove him to prepare so early, so quietly, and so emotionally? The truth begins now, and it is far more heartbreaking, surprising, and powerful than anyone expected. For most people, Bruce Willis was never just an actor. He was a symbol, a walking definition of cool. The man who could step barefoot across broken glass, stare danger in the face, fire back with a smirk, and make the entire world believe that everything would be okay. For decades, he wasn't simply part of Hollywood's identity, he was Hollywood's identity. The public saw a hero who didn't need perfection. He didn't need polished speeches or flawless interviews. Bruce carried an energy that felt raw, real, and unscripted. He brought humor to danger, heart to violence, and humanity to roles that could have easily been one-dimensional. People watched him not because he was untouchable, but because he felt familiar, like the tough older brother who always had your back. Every magazine cover, every late-night interview, every red carpet moment added to the legend. He was the guy who made vulnerability look strong. He joked easily, laughed loudly, and treated the spotlight the way he treated everything else, with a shrug and a half-smile that made him impossible not to love. And Hollywood loved him for it. Studios built franchises around his name. Directors trusted him to carry their biggest scenes. Fans around the world saw him as the unstoppable force who could run into burning buildings, chase villains across skyscrapers, and walk away from explosions without blinking. To the public, Bruce Willis wasn't aging. He wasn't slowing down. He wasn't tired. He was eternal. The kind of actor people believed would still be cracking jokes at 90, still surprising audiences, still showing up with that familiar grin that made you feel like everything was under control. But as the cameras flashed and fans cheered, the world couldn't see what was happening behind that famous smile. They didn't see the pauses between interviews. They didn't see the moments when he struggled to find the right words. They didn't see the subtle changes his family noticed long before anyone else did. Because the public image of Bruce Willis, the giant, the legend, the unbreakable action hero, was stronger than the man inside it. People looked at him and saw confidence, strength, and certainty. But the truth was far more complicated. Bruce had spent decades building a reputation that felt larger than life, and maintaining that image came with a cost the world didn't understand. Every time he walked on stage, he carried the expectations of millions. Every time he signed an autograph, he carried the weight of a legacy. Every time he played the hero, He carried the unspoken belief that he would always be that hero, on screen and off. He didn't complain. He didn't show cracks. He didn't ask for sympathy. Because the public didn't want Bruce Willis the man. They wanted Bruce Willis the myth. The fighter. The savior. The face of a generation who grew up watching him redefine what toughness looked like. But myths are heavy, and Bruce carried his for far longer than the world realized. Even as he aged, the public image never softened. People still expected the quick wit, the charming confidence, the unstoppable energy. They didn't imagine that behind the scenes, something more delicate, more fragile, and more human was beginning to unfold. They didn't imagine that the man they believed could survive anything was facing something he couldn't simply push through. They didn't imagine that the weathered smile and familiar posture were no longer effortless. They were becoming armor. Armor built to protect his last bit of privacy. Armor built to shield his family. Armor built to keep the myth alive just a little longer. Because if Bruce Willis had taught the world anything, it was this. Heroes don't run. Heroes don't break. Heroes don't let their pain show. And for years, that was the image the world clung to. The unbreakable man. The invincible star. The legend who seemed untouched by time. But legends fade. And when they do, the truth finally steps out of the shadows. Behind the public image of Bruce Willis, the charisma, the confidence, the effortless charm, there was a story unfolding that no fan, no studio, and no critic could have predicted. A story of decline, silence, preparation, and love. A story his family witnessed first. A story the world would learn far too late. This was the moment where the myth began to crack, and the real Bruce Willis, the father, the husband, the man, slowly started to emerge. Behind every transformation Bruce Willis brought to the screen, there was a quieter transformation happening inside him. One the world never saw, one he rarely spoke about, and one that reveals more about his heart than any blockbuster ever could. For years, Bruce lived with a dual identity. There was the man the world praised, and then there was the man who carried the pressure of that praise like a silent burden. The public saw the charm, the humor, the confidence. But the people closest to him knew that Bruce was far more sensitive, far more introspective, and far more emotional than anyone imagined. He had always been a thinker, a worrier, someone who carried the weight of everyone around him, someone who hated disappointing people, even when he was suffering himself. Fame didn't change him. It only made those private traits harder to hide. What most people didn't know was that Bruce rarely talked about his fears. He buried them beneath sarcasm, wit, and that iconic smirk. He protected others from seeing when he felt overwhelmed. And he never wanted his family to feel even a fraction of the pressure he carried. His hidden self was gentle in a way that contrasted everything he portrayed on screen. He loved quietly. He forgave easily. He avoided conflict whenever he could. Even as a global superstar, he often felt uncomfortable with attention unless he was performing. And when the cameras turned off, he preferred silence over applause. He wasn't the loud, fearless, invincible action hero people believed him to be. Behind closed doors, Bruce Willis was soft-spoken, private, almost shy at times. He was the kind of man who would rather sit quietly with his family than be celebrated by millions. He found comfort in stillness, in small moments, in being present rather than being seen. This hidden self became even more visible to his family as the years passed. There were days when Bruce seemed deep in thought, staring at nothing, as if searching for something he couldn't name. There were moments when he asked questions he used to answer effortlessly. Moments when he looked lost, not in a dramatic way, but in a subtle way that only those who loved him could recognize. His daughters noticed first. The pauses, the confusion, the slight disconnect between who he was and who he was becoming. His wife noticed the shift in his conversations, the way he repeated stories, the way he hesitated before replying, the way he struggled to articulate emotions he once expressed with ease. But Bruce didn't want them to worry. He didn't want the people he loved to carry the burden of his changes. And so he did what he always did. He acted. Not for Hollywood, not for fans, but for the peace of the people he cherished. He put on a smile. He kept up the humor. He pretended he was fine. He tried to hide the signs he felt growing inside him. Deep down, he knew something was happening, something irreversible, something frightening. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was silent, creeping, barely noticeable. But Bruce felt it, long before the world did. This was the part of his life he never shared publicly. Not because he was ashamed, but because he believed his family deserved protection from the storm building inside him. He had been their protector his entire life, and he wasn't ready to stop. He began preparing quietly. He became more thoughtful about the future, more deliberate, more focused on stability, safety, and legacy. He began making decisions long before his family realized why. Decisions about finances, about property, about trusts, about long-term security. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about fame. It was about love. Love for his daughters. Love for his wife. Love for the family that defined him more than any movie ever could. This hidden side of Bruce, private, emotional, deeply protective, would become the foundation for a choice that would later bring his family to tears. Because the truth was simple, heartbreaking, and beautiful. Bruce Willis wasn't preparing for the end of his career. He was preparing for the moment when he could no longer protect the people he loved in the way he once did. And when that moment arrived, the world saw only the announcement. But his family saw the years of quiet preparation, the unspoken fear behind his smile, the hidden heart of a man who foresaw the battle he would face and began fighting it not for himself, but for them. Their tears didn't come from the fortune he left behind. They came from realizing how long he had been planning it, how much he had tried to shield them from worry, how deeply he loved them without ever needing to say it aloud. This was Bruce Willis, the man the world didn't know, the hidden self that shaped every decision still to come. Long before the world knew the name Bruce Willis, long before the blockbusters, the red carpets, and the global fame, there was a boy growing up far from Hollywood's bright lights. His story didn't begin with privilege or opportunity. It began with instability, struggle, and a sense of displacement that shaped the man he would one day become. Bruce was born on a cold March day in 1955, not in America, but in Idar Oberstein, West Germany, where his father was stationed as a U.S. soldier. His mother, a German woman who understood hardship from living through the aftershocks of war, brought warmth and resilience into the home. It was a small family, humble, hardworking, and constantly adapting. They didn't have fame, they didn't have wealth, but they had grit. When Bruce was just a child, the family moved to New Jersey. They didn't arrive in a glamorous neighborhood. They arrived in a place where you worked for everything, where you learned to be tough, where life didn't hand things to you. You earned them one difficult day at a time. Growing up, Bruce wasn't the confident figure people would later assume he always was. As a kid, he battled a stutter so severe that speaking felt like a daily obstacle. Words got stuck. Sentences collapsed. Bullies noticed. Teachers often misunderstood his silence for misbehavior or disinterest. But inside him was a stubborn spirit that refused to break. His stutter didn't make him weaker. It made him observant. He watched people carefully, studied emotions, read rooms, and learned how to listen. The sharpness, the humor, the comfort with silence, all the traits that later defined him began forming during those hard childhood years. But there was one place where the stutter loosened its grip: the stage. The first time Bruce stepped into a school play, something inside him unlocked. The moment he became someone else, someone fictional, the anxiety faded. His voice steadied. His confidence grew. Acting didn't just entertain him, it freed him. It gave him a language he never had, a way to express himself without fear. This discovery changed everything. He began performing more. He found comfort in characters. He discovered the thrill of entertaining an audience, not because he wanted attention, but because it felt like the one place he didn't have to fight himself. Yet even with this newfound passion, his path wasn't straightforward. Bruce didn't come from a family with connections. Acting wasn't a dream anyone around him took seriously. He worked odd jobs, struggled financially, and hustled just to get by. He wasn't handed roles, he fought for them one audition at a time. Before Hollywood, there was the factory work, the security jobs, the bartending shifts that stretched into the early hours of the morning. He poured drinks, listened to strangers' stories, and sharpened his wit behind a bar long before he ever delivered a punchline on screen. Customers remembered him for his charisma. Fellow workers remembered him for his resilience. Everyone remembered him for the spark that lit up the room even when he was exhausted. That spark, raw, imperfect, human, was what set him apart. Hollywood didn't discover Bruce Willis. He pushed his way into it. Every challenge from his childhood became part of the foundation that made him strong enough to survive an industry that breaks most people. The stutter taught him patience. The unstable home taught him adaptability. The working-class upbringing taught him grit. The stage taught him identity. And his early failures taught him humility. These origins weren't glamorous. They weren't cinematic. They weren't the beginning of a legend. They were the beginning of a fighter. A fighter who would one day take that same toughness and pour it into every role, every career decision, and eventually, every sacrifice he made for his family. Because before he was a star, Bruce Willis was a boy fighting to find his voice. And later in life, when that voice began to fade again, his family finally understood how deeply those early years shaped everything he did, including the quiet preparations he made long before they knew why. His origins weren't just the start of his story. They were the key to understanding the man he became. Before Bruce Willis became a global name, before the world saw him as the face of action cinema, there was a single defining moment, one spark, that shifted his destiny forever. A moment that didn't happen with explosions, gunfire, or dramatic stunts, but with something far quieter. Opportunity, meeting desperation, talent meeting timing, and a young man finally stepping into the world he had spent years imagining. Bruce had already spent countless nights behind the bar, serving drinks, cracking jokes, watching life unfold across countertops sticky with spilled beer. It was a job that paid the bills, but one that secretly sharpened the tools he would one day wield as an actor. Behind that bar, Bruce didn't just mix drinks. He studied people, their fears, their confidence, their broken hearts, their bravado, their lies, their truths, everything. He watched how a man's shoulders shifted when he was hiding something, how a woman's voice cracked when she tried not to cry, how laughter could disguise pain, how anger could explode without warning. And without realizing it, Bruce was building a library inside his mind, an emotional database of humanity he later used to create some of the most memorable characters in cinema. But talent alone wasn't enough. The path to Hollywood was steep, and Bruce had climbed it slowly, painfully, with rejection after rejection weighing on him. Acting classes pushed him. Auditions humbled him. Theater roles paid almost nothing, but he took them anyway. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing freedom. Freedom from the boy who once couldn't speak. Freedom from the man who felt like life hadn't quite begun yet. Then came the spark. It happened when he walked into an off-Broadway audition for a role barely anyone else believed would matter. But Bruce saw something in it. A chance, not just to perform, but to prove himself. To show he belonged. And when he stepped onto that stage, something electric happened. The confidence he found as a child returned, but now it was sharper, deeper, stronger. His humor landed. His timing hit perfectly. And unlike so many auditions before, this one felt like it was his. Soon enough, casting directors felt it too. One performance led to another. One small role led to a slightly bigger one. Momentum started building. Bruce wasn't famous yet, but doors that had always been locked were beginning to crack open. People noticed his unpredictability, the raw energy he carried, the way he could be charming and intense in the same breath. Then came the role that changed everything: Moonlighting. A television show nobody expected to explode suddenly had its breakthrough star. Bruce Willis wasn't the typical leading man. He wasn't polished, he wasn't conventional, he wasn't predictable. But that was exactly why audiences fell in love with him. He was refreshing, he was flawed, he was real. And he was unforgettable. The chemistry he created on screen didn't feel scripted, it felt alive. He delivered lines with a kind of offbeat magic that made every scene unpredictable. Audiences tuned in not just for the story, but for him. The man who had once struggled to speak was now speaking to millions every week. It was the moment he realized that everything he had endured, every painful childhood memory, every embarrassing stutter, every long night wondering if he was wasting his time, had led him here. The spark wasn't the show itself. The spark was the recognition that he could do this, that he belonged here, that his voice, once broken, now had power. And then Hollywood called, not politely, not gradually, with force. Producers saw something in Bruce that was rare, a man who wasn't trying to be a hero but simply was one, naturally. His humor wasn't scripted, it was instinctual. His toughness didn't feel fabricated, it felt earned. He didn't look like an actor pretending to be strong. He looked like a man who had survived enough real battles to understand the role. When Die Hard came to him, it wasn't supposed to be a masterpiece. It wasn't supposed to redefine action films forever. But Bruce Willis did something no one expected. He made the hero vulnerable. He made pain visible. He made fear human. He didn't play a superhero. He played a man trying to survive, trying to protect, trying to fight through circumstances bigger than himself. That spark from years earlier, awkward, uncertain, fragile, had become a flame. A flame Hollywood couldn't ignore. A flame fans around the world felt instantly. Bruce Willis wasn't acting. He was channeling every hardship, every fear, every quiet moment of doubt into characters who resonated with millions. People didn't watch him win. They watched him fight. And that fight mirrored something in them. The spark didn't just ignite his career. It ignited a connection, a bond between a man who once fought to speak and an audience that now hung on to his every word. And yet, beneath the fame and success, there remained a whisper of the boy who stuttered, a softness in his heart, a vulnerability hidden behind sarcasm and humor, a side of him the public never fully saw, but his family always felt. That spark, humble, imperfect, accidental, marked the first moment Bruce realized he might leave something behind. Not money, not legacy, but light. The kind of light created not by the spotlight, but from the dark places he had overcome. And later in life, when everything began to fade, when the world finally understood the battle he had been fighting, his family looked back and realized that spark was more important than anyone knew. It was the moment that made everything possible. The moment that shaped the fortune he built. The moment that explained why he worked so hard, pushed so far, loved so deeply, and prepared so quietly. The spark wasn't fame. It wasn't a career. It was purpose. A purpose Bruce Willis carried long before he knew how his story would end. Bruce Willis didn't just break into Hollywood. He shattered the door off its hinges. And what made his breakthrough so extraordinary wasn't just the scale of his success, but the way it happened, unexpectedly, defiantly, and with a force nobody in the industry saw coming. When Die Hard premiered in 1988, Bruce was still known primarily as the charming guy from a quirky TV show. Critics doubted him. Studios questioned him. Even some fans wondered if he could pull off a serious action role. He wasn't the type. He didn't have the traditional physique, the intimidating presence, or the stoic silence associated with action heroes of the time. But when Bruce stepped onto that screen as John McClane, something seismic shifted in Hollywood. He didn't portray a perfect, invincible hero. He portrayed a man who bled, who limped, who panicked, who argued with himself, who cracked jokes in the middle of life or death, chaos because humor was how he survived. He wasn't larger than life. He was painfully, beautifully human. Audiences saw themselves in him. They saw their fears, their frustrations, their determination. They saw a man who kept fighting even when he was exhausted. And overnight, Bruce Willis wasn't just a star. He was a phenomenon. The success was staggering. Critics who once dismissed him were now praising his rawness. Studios scrambled to sign him. Directors wrote roles specifically for him. Fans around the world embraced him as a new kind of hero. One who didn't need a cape, a godlike physique, or a flawless persona. Bruce had something better, truth. And as Hollywood evolved, so did he. After Die Hard, Bruce didn't get trapped in typecasting. He refused to become predictable. He explored comedy, drama, mystery, romance, and psychological thrillers. His range shocked people. He wasn't just the cop, running barefoot across broken glass. He was the broken man trying to rebuild his life in The Sixth Sense. The hardened soldier confronting impossible choices in Tears of the Sun. The grieving father in Armageddon. The flawed husband in Moonrise Kingdom. The aging spy in Red. And dozens of roles that showcased how deeply he understood humanity's contradictions. Every performance carried something uniquely Bruce. A flicker of humor. A shadow of vulnerability. A spark of defiance. A quiet ache beneath the surface. And yet, even as his fame skyrocketed, Bruce kept his life grounded. He never turned into the Hollywood stereotype. No ego, no arrogance, no desperate need for attention. He was known for being professional, generous, and unexpectedly humble. Co-stars described him as someone who remembered every name on set. Someone who cracked jokes to calm nervous actors. Someone who brought warmth to even the most intense filming days. But behind the scenes, something deeper powered his drive. Bruce Willis had grown up with very little. He knew what it felt like to struggle, to worry about money, to fear the future, to wonder whether life would ever feel stable. And when success finally wrapped around him, he made a silent promise to himself. His family would never feel the instability he once felt. That promise became his engine. He worked relentlessly, not for fame, but for security. Not just for himself, but for his children. Bruce took roles others might ignore. He filmed back-to-back. He accepted projects that kept income steady even when critics questioned them. Not because he lacked passion, but because he had priorities. Family, protection, legacy. That was his breakthrough. Not just the film career, but the shift inside him. The understanding that with every paycheck, every deal, every investment, he was building a fortress around the people he loved. A safety net that would last long after his strength faded, long after his memory changed, long after he could no longer be the man the world once saw on screen. This breakthrough wasn't only professional, it was personal. The boy who couldn't speak fluently now had the power to provide. The bartender who watched others dream was now living his own. The actor who once doubted himself was now defining an entire era. And as the years passed, Bruce continued shaping a fortune, not out of greed, but out of duty. Each business move was calculated. Each investment was intentional. Each property was chosen with a purpose. He wasn't chasing luxury. He was building protection. Because deep down, Bruce understood something long before anyone else realized it. One day, he might not be able to express himself clearly. One day, he might not be able to explain his choices. One day, he might not be able to guide his family through the future. So he began preparing early, quietly, lovingly, strategically. The breakthrough that turned Bruce Willis into a Hollywood legend was the same breakthrough that allowed him to secure a future his family never expected. A future that would later bring them to tears when they discovered how carefully he had built it. He didn't just make a career. He made a foundation, a shield, a legacy in motion. And as his fame grew, as the world celebrated him, as the industry crowned him a global icon, Bruce Willis remained focused on the one thing that meant more to him than any movie. The family he was building his entire world for. Bruce Willis had always been a man who could read people faster than most people could form a sentence. It was part instinct, part survival, part the quiet intuition that made him such a powerful actor long before he became a global icon. But as his condition progressed, something unexpected happened. The world assumed Bruce was losing everything, when in reality, he was gaining something he never had before. Time. Time to watch his family without the noise. Time to notice the things he once missed while jumping between flights, scripts, studios, and relentless film sets. Time to reflect on the life he built. Not the fame, not the headlines, not the legacy, but the people. And each person in his life revealed a different truth to him. His wife, Emma, became the quiet anchor in a storm no one asked for. She didn't break, she didn't crumble, she didn't complain. She simply adjusted her entire world to hold him steady, even when he didn't always understand he needed holding. Bruce saw that, and it stayed with him. His ex-wife, Demi Moore, surprised him in a way he never could have predicted. Their story had been through every possible chapter: love, heartbreak, co-parenting, distance, reconnection. But now it entered something deeper. She showed up not for the past, not for obligation, but out of a loyalty that only decades of shared life can create. She became part of his circle again, a living reminder that family doesn't disappear when romance does. And then there were his daughters, each one carrying a piece of him. Rumor, the eldest, with his intensity and unfiltered honesty. She became the voice of reason, the one who asked the difficult questions and refused to let anyone pretend things were okay when they weren't. Scout, the artist, the emotional heartbeat of the family, felt everything twice as deeply. She was the one who held his hand a little longer, the one who memorized every expression, every smile, every moment, because she feared the day those memories might be all she had left. Tallulah, fragile yet brave, struggling with her own challenges, but finding strength in caring for her father. She didn't hide how much it hurt. She didn't pretend to be okay. Bruce respected that honesty more than she ever knew. And his two youngest daughters, the ones who still saw him as dad, long before legend. They didn't understand diagnoses or medical terms. They only understood love. Pure, untouched, unconditional love. In watching them, Bruce realized something heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. They didn't care about his films. They didn't care about the awards. They didn't care about the die-hard legacy or the Hollywood crown people placed on his head. They cared about him. Just him. The man who danced like a fool in the kitchen. The man who told jokes that didn't make sense but still made everyone laugh. The man who made pancakes at midnight for no reason except that it felt right. This realization hit him harder than any diagnosis ever could. Because for the first time in decades, Bruce Willis wasn't looking at life from the outside. He wasn't performing. He wasn't entertaining. He wasn't pretending to be indestructible. He was simply living, fully, quietly, vulnerably. And in those moments of raw honesty, something inside him shifted. He understood that everything he built, the fame, the fortune, the empire, meant nothing unless it protected the people whose lives were intertwined with his. That was the moment the real Bruce Willis stepped forward. Not the hero from the big screen, not the tough guy with the catchphrases, not the action star who walked away from explosions without blinking. A father, a husband, a man who loved his family more fiercely than the world ever knew. This was the emotional center of his story, and it was here, in this deeply personal understanding, that the true purpose behind the fortune he prepared finally began to take shape. There comes a moment in every family crisis when everything becomes painfully clear, when the questions that once felt confusing suddenly sharpen into focus. For Bruce Willis and the people who loved him, that moment happened around a quiet kitchen table on an afternoon that should have been ordinary. What started as a simple conversation about scheduling, doctors, and daily routines turned into something much deeper. Bruce wasn't speaking much that day. Instead, he was observing, listening, watching the way his family communicated around him. And it was in that silence that they uncovered the truth he had left behind like a breadcrumb trail. Notes, letters, documents, small reminders of a man who had planned ahead long before anyone realized why. His wife found the first clue, a sealed envelope tucked inside a drawer he rarely used. Inside, a handwritten message. for when the time comes. No drama, no long paragraphs, just Bruce's straightforward honesty, the same tone he used his whole life. His daughters discovered more: financial outlines, estate plans, and handwritten lists titled, "What Matters Most." Not one of those lists mentioned money, fame, or achievements. They mentioned names, memories, traditions, things he wanted them to hold on to, even when he couldn't explain them himself. But the most emotional moment came when Demi, quietly flipping through a folder Bruce had organized years earlier, found something that made the entire room fall silent. It was a box containing digital recordings, private ones he made alone long before his diagnosis became public. One by one, they played them. Bruce, on camera, speaking with the same sincerity that made him beloved around the world. Some videos were simple. Messages to his daughters about growing up. Advice for moments he feared he might miss. Little reminders of who he was and who he hoped they would become. Others were heavier. Acknowledgements of the changes he felt happening inside his mind. Confessions that he didn't want to burden them. Promises that he would do everything in his power to protect them, even if his clarity didn't last. And then there were the financial recordings, where he explained in his own voice why he set aside certain assets, why he distributed things in specific ways, and why it mattered to him that his family would never feel lost or unprepared. He didn't want them to cry out of fear. He wanted them to cry out of gratitude, to know he had been thinking of them long before the world ever imagined he needed help. This was the moment his family finally understood the purpose of his actions. Bruce wasn't preparing for the end. He was preparing for them. He knew his condition would create confusion, stress, and countless decisions they would have to make on his behalf. He knew the emotional weight would be heavy. He knew the public would watch, judge, speculate, and twist the story. And he knew the only shield he could give his family was preparation. The fortune he left behind wasn't just wealth, it was a system. A protection net. A plan for every scenario. A map built with love, signed by a man who had spent decades appearing invincible but was, in truth, deeply human. And as the family sat together, listening to his voice echo through the room, the tears came. Not because of sadness alone, but because they were witnessing the depth of a father's love expressed in the only way he knew how. Quietly, privately, completely. This was the moment they realized the truth. Bruce Willis hadn't abandoned control of his life. He had taken control while he still could, and turned it into one last gift for the people he loved more than anything in the world. Even legends have moments when the weight of life becomes heavier than any one person can bear. For Bruce Willis, that moment didn't come on a movie set. It didn't come in front of screaming fans or flashing cameras. It came quietly, in small, almost imperceptible ways that only those closest to him noticed. The first signs were subtle, pauses in conversation, forgetting lines he had recited perfectly for decades, moments of confusion where the man who once exuded effortless confidence hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. It wasn't dramatic. It was human, and it terrified those who loved him. At first, his family brushed it off. "Everyone forgets things sometimes," they said. "Stress from work, the years catching up." But Bruce knew better. Deep down, he understood the changes weren't temporary. He recognized them before anyone else. And because he was Bruce Willis, resilient, strong, stubborn, he tried to hide it, to manage it, to continue being the protector even as the ground began to shift beneath him. Hollywood, however, was less forgiving. The roles that once came effortlessly started to feel like obstacles. Scripts became harder to memorize. Physical performances demanded more energy than he could reliably give. Directors who once trusted him implicitly began to question, cautiously, whether he could carry the same weight he once did. The world wasn't cruel. It was simply moving faster than Bruce could keep up. And yet, no one outside his family saw the true emotional weight of what was happening. They didn't see the private frustration, the quiet fear, or the grief of a man who knew that his public persona, the untouchable action hero, the legendary performer, was slowly slipping. They only saw sporadic moments of weakness and assumed it was temporary. But within the walls of his home, the truth was clear. Bruce was falling, not into failure, but into vulnerability. A vulnerability he had spent a lifetime hiding. And this fall wasn't just about career or reputation. It was about identity, about control, about a man who had always been the hero now realizing he could no longer be the unflinching force everyone expected him to be. He retreated in subtle ways. He became quieter in social settings. He deferred decisions he once made instantly. He relied more heavily on his family for guidance, though he rarely admitted it. And while he was still Bruce Willis, the public figure, the legend, the hero, the private Bruce was facing the undeniable truth that his life, as he knew it, was changing irrevocably. The family felt the weight of it too. They saw the man who had always been larger than life grow smaller in ways that weren't immediately visible to the outside world. Every laugh came with a pause, every joke with a hesitation, every smile with a hint of exhaustion. And they mourned, not just for what was happening, but for the man they feared they might lose in pieces over time. Bruce's fall was paradoxical. Publicly, he remained iconic. His legacy, his films, his achievements continued to shine. But privately, he faced an internal battle far fiercer than any he ever portrayed on screen. He was fighting a decline he could not act around, a vulnerability he could not script out, a future he could no longer control entirely. And yet, even in the midst of this fall, there was something remarkable. Bruce was not defeated. He was recalibrating. He was choosing carefully what mattered, where to place his energy, and how to continue protecting the people he loved. Every decision, every preparation, every sacrifice was made in the quiet, far from the cameras and headlines. Every step of this fall was deliberate, thoughtful, and guided by the love that had always defined him. The fall wasn't the end of Bruce Willis. It was the moment he began transforming the rest of his life. Not for fame, not for Hollywood, not for the world, but for the family he loved more than any action scene, more than any accolade, more than any script. Because even when a hero falls, the legacy of the heart remains. Silence is one of the heaviest burdens a family can carry. For Bruce Willis, it was not emptiness, but a space filled with unspoken words, unshared fears, and quiet observations. After the fall came the silence, a period where the world seemed to pause around him. While inside his home, time slowed to a more intense, intimate rhythm. Bruce wasn't absent. He was still present, still himself in many ways. But the spark that once radiated effortlessly in interviews, on set and in public appearances had become subdued. He spoke less. He repeated himself more often. He relied on his family in ways he had rarely allowed before. And in that reliance was a lesson about vulnerability the world had never witnessed. For his daughters, the silence was both painful and profound. They had grown up idolizing him on screen, imagining the fearless, unbreakable man. But now they sat beside him in quiet rooms, realizing the person behind the legend was fallible, fragile, and human. Every glance, every pause, every hesitation carried meaning they had to interpret with care. They learned to read the subtleties of his expressions, the slight inflection in his voice, the small gestures that communicated more than words ever could. His wife, Emma, became the interpreter of that silence, translating his quiet into action, ensuring that his needs were met without him having to explain. She witnessed moments where Bruce seemed lost in thought, moments where recognition of himself wavered, and moments where the sheer weight of his own mind pressed down, almost invisibly, onto those around him. The silence was not empty, it was deliberate. Bruce had always been a man of foresight. Even in these quiet moments, he was preparing, planning, and leaving behind guidance without speaking it aloud. Letters tucked away in drawers, documents outlining his wishes, instructions on how to safeguard the future. Every gesture, though subtle, was intentional, and the family felt it. They began to understand the depth of what he had orchestrated. The silence became a form of communication, a testament to the love and foresight that defined Bruce is both a father and a husband. They realized he was not withdrawing from life or them. He was stepping into a different form of care, one that required patience, observation, and trust. Outside, the world barely noticed. Fans, critics, and media outlets speculated, but none grasped the magnitude of what was happening. The silence concealed the true courage. It took for Bruce to navigate these days with dignity, humor, and the relentless focus on protecting those he loved most. In this silence, a pattern emerged. The man who once spoke through performance, through charisma, through laughter, now spoke through action, planning, and the quiet presence that demanded attention in subtler, more powerful ways. Every calculated step, every carefully prepared decision, was a conversation with his family about love, responsibility, and foresight. It was here, in the quiet, that the magnitude of Bruce Willis's heart became most evident. Fame, fortune, and legacy faded against the intimacy of a man ensuring his loved ones would be cared for long after words could fail him. The hero of Hollywood was still present, but the hero of home, the father, the husband, the protector, had become the centerpiece of his life. This silence, heavy with emotion, responsibility, and foresight, was not resignation. It was strategy. It was love. It was the kind of quiet heroism that the world would never fully see, but his family would carry forever. Because in the silence, Bruce was still speaking. And for those who knew how to listen, the message was clear. Everything he had ever done, every choice he had ever made, was for them. After months of quiet reflection, careful planning, and the painful awareness of his changing world, Bruce Willis began a different kind of return. Not a return to the camera's flash, or the applause of millions. This was a return to connection, to presence, to the relationships that mattered most, and had always mattered more than any Hollywood accolade. It began with small gestures, sitting with his daughters for breakfast instead of rushing to a film set, taking walks with Emma, noticing the subtle details of life he had long overlooked, listening, really listening, in ways that only time, vulnerability, and shared fear can teach. He returned not as a superstar, but as a father and husband fully aware of the fleeting nature of life and the weight of legacy. His family, initially hesitant, began to respond. The walls that had formed around the home out of worry, uncertainty, and protective instinct slowly dissolved. Conversations became longer, more open. Laughter returned, quieter but more meaningful. The simple act of being present, fully and intentionally, began to restore a sense of normalcy that had once seemed impossible. Professionally, Bruce's return was equally subtle but no less significant. He became selective, choosing projects that allowed him to balance presence and passion. There were no blockbuster risks, no high-octane stunts demanding physical extremes. Instead, he sought roles that resonated, that allowed him to express the wisdom and vulnerability he had accumulated. Films like Moonrise Kingdom, Red, and smaller independent projects became vessels for his quiet genius, a bridge between past accomplishments and the life he now prioritized above all else. But the most profound aspect of his return was not on screen. It was in how he prepared his family for a future he might not fully navigate. Every conversation, every note, every carefully planned financial or legal decision was part of a larger picture, ensuring his loved ones were protected, even if the day came when he could no longer guide them. The fortune he built over decades of work became more than just wealth. It became a testament to foresight, a safety net, a declaration of love. His family began to understand that the tears they shed were not just for money, but for the depth of planning, care, and thought behind every choice he had made, silently, privately, lovingly. Bruce's return was also emotional. He allowed himself to be vulnerable with his children in ways he never had. He admitted fear. He shared regrets. He laughed at mistakes, both his own and theirs. And in doing so, he strengthened the bonds that had always been the core of his identity. Fame faded into background noise. The spotlight no longer dictated the terms of his life. The measure of success became simpler: connection, love, and the knowledge that he had done everything he could to safeguard his family. In the end, Bruce's return wasn't about reclaiming glory. It was about reclaiming purpose, about transforming a life of extraordinary achievement into a life of extraordinary love. It was about showing, without words or fanfare, that even the greatest heroes must sometimes step aside, refocus, and ensure that those who matter most are safe and cherished. And for the family, this return was nothing short of miraculous. They saw not just the man who had entertained millions, but the man who had thought ahead, fought silently, and loved unconditionally. They realized that Bruce Willis's true legacy was not on screen, but in the way he returned to what mattered most, a presence that would continue to protect, guide, and inspire them for the rest of their lives. Bruce Willis's story is often told through the lens of Hollywood glamour, explosive action, and box office triumphs. But the truth, the part few truly understand, lies not in his films or awards, but in the quiet, deliberate, and heartfelt way he shaped his life, his family, and the legacy he would leave behind. By the time the world saw him step away from the spotlight, Bruce had already achieved something far greater than fame. He had built a fortress of love, foresight, and care, one that would protect and guide his family for generations. The legacy Bruce crafted is multifaceted, blending professional accomplishment with deep personal responsibility. On one hand, there is the tangible legacy, an unparalleled career spanning decades, iconic films that continue to define action cinema, comedic timing that inspired countless performers, and a reputation as one of Hollywood's most reliable, versatile, and charismatic stars. His influence on the industry is undeniable. Actors, directors, and fans alike recognize the unique combination of vulnerability and strength that Bruce brought to every role, forever changing the way heroes could be portrayed on screen. He proved that a character could be simultaneously human and heroic, fallible yet courageous, humorous yet profound. But the true measure of his legacy is far less visible and infinitely more personal. It exists in the countless decisions he made behind closed doors, carefully orchestrated to safeguard the people he loved most. It is the financial stability he secured through decades of strategic investments, ensuring that his children and family would never feel the fear or uncertainty he experienced in his own youth. It is the meticulously organized legal and estate plans, designed not for recognition but to prevent the stress, disputes, or confusion that can arise when a patriarch can no longer act on behalf of his loved ones. In those plans, there is a story of foresight and love that transcends material wealth. Bruce understood that a fortune without guidance could be a source of tension or division, so he structured every element to protect relationships, nurture growth, and promote long-term stability. Every document, every note, every recording he left was a silent testament to the man he had been, pragmatic, thoughtful, and deeply committed to the well-being of his family. The tears they shed upon discovering the extent of his preparations were not just for the money, but for the profound awareness that he had always prioritized them over himself, even when it was no longer easy to do so. Bruce's emotional legacy is equally compelling. Throughout his career and private life, he modeled resilience, courage, and integrity. He showed his children that strength is not defined by invulnerability or fame, but by the capacity to care, to plan, and to act with consideration for others. He demonstrated that love is active, not passive, that the most heroic acts often happen in quiet, unnoticed ways, far from public recognition. In every letter, recording, and gesture, Bruce communicated that family matters more than accolades, presence matters more than performance, and foresight matters more than immediate gratification. Even the challenges he faced later in life, moments of vulnerability and decline, contribute profoundly to his legacy. They reveal the depth of his humanity and the courage it takes to confront personal change with grace. Rather than hiding from his condition, Bruce embraced the reality of it, allowing himself to be vulnerable with his family while continuing to provide, protect, and inspire. He taught them that true heroism is not in never falling, but in rising with intention, love, and humility, and in preparing those you love to continue even when you cannot. Bruce's legacy is also cultural. He changed the expectations of an action hero, proving that humor, vulnerability, And relatability could coexist with physical prowess and cinematic intensity. Characters like John McClane in Die Hard are remembered not just for their daring feats, but for their emotional depth, their human flaws, and their relentless perseverance. Bruce introduced a new blueprint for heroism, one where the audience could see themselves reflected in the protagonist, creating connection, empathy, and enduring admiration. He influenced generations of actors, filmmakers, and fans, reminding them that authenticity is the most compelling form of artistry. Moreover, Bruce's story teaches a subtle yet profound lesson about legacy itself. It is not measured by applause or public recognition alone, but by the enduring impact on those we love most. His careful preparations, his intentional planning, and his thoughtful actions ensured that his family would thrive long after the cameras stopped rolling. In doing so, he transcended the traditional concept of legacy as fame or fortune, redefining it as love expressed through responsibility, foresight, and unwavering commitment. His daughters, now adults, carry pieces of Bruce with them in ways both tangible and intangible. The discipline, humor, resilience, and kindness they inherited are living extensions of his influence. They benefit not only from the financial security he meticulously arranged, but also from the emotional lessons embedded in his every action. Lessons about care, courage, and the quiet power of consistent, deliberate love. Bruce's influence on them is profound, shaping their decisions, their perspectives, and the way they approach challenges in their own lives. Through them, his values continue to ripple outward, touching the lives of those they, in turn, love and care for. The public may remember Bruce Willis for his roles, his stunts, or his celebrity persona, but the true legacy lies in the life he curated for his family and the principles he embodied. This is a man who understood that the ultimate responsibility of influence is not recognition, but stewardship. He transformed success into service, not through grand gestures or public proclamations, but through quiet, consistent, and deliberate action. And that, perhaps, is the most extraordinary achievement of all. Even as Bruce's health changes, as time continues its inevitable march, the foundation he built endures. His fortune, carefully structured and purposefully allocated, becomes more than money. It becomes a map of his values, a reflection of his foresight, and a testament to the depth of his care. The house he maintained, the properties he managed, and the carefully curated investments all speak to a man who understood that wealth without intention is hollow, but wealth with purpose can carry love forward for generations. Legacy, Bruce teaches us, is not about what we leave on screens, in headlines, or on billboards. It is about what we leave in the hearts, minds, and lives of the people we hold dear. It is the invisible architecture of thought, care, and foresight that supports those we love when we are no longer able to do so ourselves. Bruce Willis has built such a legacy, one that is resilient, enduring, and deeply human. And in the end, his family's tears upon discovering the extent of his preparation are tears of awe and gratitude. They are a recognition of the quiet heroism, the deliberate thought, and the unspoken love that Bruce infused into every corner of their lives. They realize that the man who once conquered the world on screen has now conquered the most meaningful realm of all, the protection, guidance, and emotional security of those he loves most. Bruce Willis's legacy is not in the roles he played, but in the life he carefully orchestrated behind the scenes. Not in the fame he earned, but in the care he demonstrated. Not in the applause of millions, but in the quiet gratitude of those who will carry forward his values, lessons, and love for the rest of their lives. It is a legacy of humanity, of foresight, of love, of courage, of a man who understood that the greatest power is the power to protect and nurture those you hold dear, even when life itself becomes uncertain. And so, as the world continues to celebrate Bruce Willis on screen, his family celebrates him off it. They remember a man who planned, loved, and sacrificed in ways the cameras never captured. They remember a father who foresaw the future, a husband who shielded, and a man who, in the quietest, most profound ways, ensured that his love would endure long after his own voice begins to fade. Bruce Willis has left behind more than a fortune. He has left behind a life lesson, He has left behind a model of devotion, preparation, and love that will echo through generations. And in that, his true heroism will never be forgotten. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Talksberry and comment. Remember, greatness isn't in the spotlight, but in the struggle behind it.